right. Well, thank you everybody for coming tonight. I am Kathleen March. I'm actually the children's manager at our Downers Grove store. So thank you all for being here. I honestly can't think of a better way to kick off a weekend, to spend a Friday night than with one of my all-time favorites. We were
Oh,
chatting when Jenny first got on the event that she's been writing about as long as I have been working at Anderson's Bookshop. So she was one of my first forays into children's lit. And so
oh.
thank you for that, because it was one of the first books. Amelia May was the first book that I read going, oh my God, this is children's literature. Yes, I can do this
Oh,
job. So you have a very big place in my heart. And I always go back to your books. They're classic hand sells. So thank you for giving us books that we love to read ourselves, but that we love to share with the kids in our lives, and that we love to connect with the kids in our lives over. So
oh.
thank you so much. And you all, if you haven't had a chance to read The Lion of Mars,
There it is.
yep, there it is. I hope that you talk about the writing process and how you got into Belle's mind, because I was just blown away with how you were able to write this voice of a kid who's never been to Earth and is really curious. And you could really see how you worked to come at it with your view, writing from his viewpoint. I don't know if any of
Yeah,
that made sense, but
it did. It did.
okay, good, good. All right. So everybody else, if you have questions as we're going along, just drop them in the chat and I'll be moderating it, and we'll have a nice little Q&A after where Miss Jenny is done. So without further ado, since y'all didn't come here to see me blather on, I
Oh,
am going to turn it over to the incomparable Miss Jennifer Holm. So thank you so much for being here tonight.
thank you for having me. Well, I'm very excited to be here to talk about The Lion of Mars. If you think I'm talking funny, I probably am. I just got braces again after many years since I was a teenager because my teeth have moved. And you know what? It's just as hard the second time around to have braces. So I'm still trying to figure out like if I sound silly or not. My kids say that I sound very funny to them. Anyway, I thought I'd give you a quick little peek of my writing space. So I am zooming into you from California. I live in a little town called Costa Mesa. We are south of Los Angeles, and we're about 20 minutes from Disneyland. My husband actually can ride his bike to Disneyland. And we are having, I hear you guys had a pretty snowy day. We are having an unseasonably hot day. So this is my office. I'm gonna kind of turn my computer around. That's where I keep my books, and got the printer over here. Oh, and that's my husband. Wave, Jonathan. Wave.
Hi.
He's a video game designer. He's the reason kids don't read books. No, I'm kidding. I'll take you outside. I can show you a good Southern California sunset. I'm not from Southern California, so I appreciate the sunsets. And that's what it looks like. Very pretty. I grew up in landlocked Pennsylvania, so Southern California is still very new to me, even though I've been here a few years. All right, I'm gonna come back over, and I'm gonna just give you a real quick little PowerPoint about how I generally came up with the idea for Mars. And then we'll have some fun Q&As, because I think that's what everybody likes the most. All right, so I'm going to share my screen. Oops, I need to, if you could enable me to share my screen if it's possible, my Anderson friends. Oh, I am the co-host now.
Yep. Okay. You should be
I feel fancy.
Yes.
Here we go. All right, awesome. You guys can see it, and let me just hit play, slideshow, play. Come on. There we go. So The Lion of Mars. This book was actually inspired by my late father. So my dad was, he was a very accomplished man. He was a Navy fighter pilot, and he grew up and he went on to become a pediatrician. But what was really interesting about him was he flew off of aircraft carriers during the Korean War. And he was like a real fly boy, had a leather jacket. And it was actually a very dangerous job flying off of aircraft carriers. If you've ever seen one, they are the boats. They're like very wide boats that the Navy has, that they literally have a landing strip on the boat. So when the plane is landing, they have to hit that boat hard, or they just miss it and go right into the ocean. So it was probably one of the most dangerous kind of piloting gigs in the world. After he died, I really started to look more into his past. I was just more curious about his Navy career. And it was really interesting for me because I learned that a lot of the first astronauts were actually just like him. They were all Navy pilots who served during the Korean War. In fact, Buzz Aldrin, Neil Armstrong, John Glenn, some of the most famous astronauts, they were all Navy fighter pilots like my father. And so when I thought about it, it didn't seem that becoming an astronaut was such a far stretch, right? My own dad could have been one. And I started thinking about Mars. Here's Mars. So you guys probably know Mars is the famous red planet, right? When you look up in the night sky, you can actually see something a little red. And when I was first starting to write this book, I didn't know a lot about Mars. I had to do a lot of research myself. It was just like, honestly, like doing historical research. So here's some things I learned about Mars. Here is a picture of Mars. What is Mars like? Well, it turns out it's really far away. It's millions and millions of miles away. And our planet, Earth, and Mars, they orbit the sun at different rates. And so because of that, our two planets are only close to each other once about every 2 years. So that means when we want to go to Mars from Earth, we really can only go every 24 months. So that makes getting to Mars very, very difficult. Oops, sorry. It's also freezing cold on Mars. You guys are probably having a cold day there. Well, cold on Mars is minus 284 degrees. That is very, very chilly. So it's not really, it's not even really sweater weather on the surface of Mars. Mars doesn't have a breathable atmosphere. You can't breathe as a human or as an animal on Mars. So that's kind of a problem. So you're starting to get the sense, right, that Mars is very dangerous, right? It's far away, it's cold, you can't breathe, and also it has radiation. So there's a lot of radiation that pelts the surface of Mars. So how would we possibly live on Mars? Oops, I'm sorry. And the gravity, I missed my gravity slide. And the gravity on Mars is different than Earth. So there's less gravity on Mars. So the way that is a concern for humans is that they don't know what the effects of lower gravity will have on the human body, like on our muscles and bones. Will it cause our bones to stop growing? Will it cause our muscles to atrophy? So it makes Mars even more dangerous. The other thing about Mars is the dust. And we experienced what the dust of Mars was like in real time. So we currently do have a rover on Mars, although he's kind of dead at the moment. His name is Curiosity, or her name, or its name. It's a very cute rover. And unfortunately, the rover got caught in a dust storm on Mars. So about every 5 years on Mars, they have what's called a global dust storm. It's a dust storm that covers the whole planet. And it's not like you would imagine a storm being on Earth. It's not like things blowing around and tornadoes. It's really just dust slowly filling the atmosphere. And we know that because when Curiosity was living through the last global dust storm, it took a picture. And this is a picture of what Mars looked like during the global dust storm. Unfortunately, what happened to the poor Curiosity rover, if you look at this picture, these are pictures of Mars from the rover. And on the left, you can see there's the sun. And as more dust is kicked into the atmosphere and it gets thicker and thicker and thicker, you lose all the light from the sun until eventually you have no light coming to the surface of Mars. And that was a bummer for our rover, Curiosity, because the rover and probably most everything we'll send to Mars is run on solar panels. And so it lost all its power. And then it was probably also had like dust on it. So it's dead. And we just sent a new rover to Mars that should land next month. So if we want to live on Mars, where are we going to live? I think in a lot of like science fiction books and movies, we kind of imagine living on the surface of Mars, you know, something kind of cool and glittery like this picture, like glass domes with palm trees in it. But I think the reality is we're not going to be living someplace like this when we first get to Mars. And I learned that from talking to a lot of engineers who are working on what will be the first habitats for Mars. Because of what I talked about earlier about how the surface of Mars is so dangerous, right? Because it's cold, no atmosphere, all that mad radiation, the bad dust. We're probably not going to want to live on the surface. We're going to probably want to live underground. And so a lot of engineers are talking about how when we first go to Mars, we might live in lava tubes. Now, this is a lava tube on Earth. Basically, a lava tube is just this really immense cavern, like a very long, winding, deep cavern that's left from when lava has gone through the Earth millions of years ago, and it leaves behind like a massive tunnel. And it's kind of like the perfect habitat to live on Mars, because you can just bring your, imagine your bubble tent or your preformed habitat, you can just drop it into this cavern underground. One of the other problems with Mars is, what are we going to eat? We're not going to be able to like bop out to McDonald's or call DoorDash or go to the grocery store. Like I mentioned, we're going to be basically 2 years away from any ship coming from Earth to Mars to resupply food. So on Mars, we're going to have to learn how to farm and raise our own food. One thing they're doing right now on the International Space Station is they're raising algae. So there's an algae called spirulina, which is actually very good for you. It's very healthy. It's got a lot of vitamins and nutrients. And they raised it on the International Space Station. And you can eat it. It's really good. And so I can show you, here is a power bar from the European Space Agency. And so they're saying that that might be one of the things we'll raise on Mars. All right, so should we also, when we're thinking about going to Mars, should we take a buddy? So I am a huge cat person. I love cats. And so I thought a lot about if we should take a cat to Mars, because, we have taken an awful lot of animals to space. So animals were the original test pilots for space. We have sent dogs to space. We have sent mice to space, and insects and chimpanzees. And it turns out we have actually sent cats to space, which I found fascinating. The French had a feline space program in the 1960s where they trained up 14 cats to go to space to become an astrocat. And in the end, they picked one named Felicette, and this is her. She's very adorable. And they shot this poor cat into space, and she came back and she was fine. So it is actually totally possible to bring animals to space. I'm pretty sure my own cat would not want to go to space, though. Probably the last thing that's on everybody's mind is, will there be Wi-Fi, right? I have 2 kids. I have a 17-year-old and a 13-year-old, and their entire life is dictated by whether or not the Wi-Fi is good. Well, I have some very bad news for you, is that the Wi-Fi will be very bad on Mars, because we are so far away, millions of miles away, that to just send a simple message from Earth to Mars, or Mars and back, can take up to like a half hour. So you are not going to be able to like watch Netflix on Mars, unfortunately. So you might want to pack some old school, low tech stuff, like books that are paper, like The Lion of Mars, or maybe some old school DVDs or records. All right. So what is The Lion of Mars about? Well, The Lion of Mars is about a boy named Bell, and it takes place in the year 2091. So way, way in the future. And this is Bell. And Bell lives in the American settlement on Mars. And he has a cat named Leo. And he lives with other kids. So there are a bunch of other kids who live in the American settlement. All the children were brought to Mars as babies. They're orphans. So we have Trey, who's 13. Vera, who's 15. She's a little goth. Flossie is 16. She's really obsessed with Earth fashions because she's never been to Earth that she remembers. And then Albie is the 17-year-old. And these drawings were drawn by my daughter, so. And they live underground in a lava tube, like I'd mentioned earlier. And this is a really cool drawing I saw of a possible habitat in a lava tube. It's kind of how I imagine them living on Mars, with like a lot of round edges, not like sharp edges. They're like normal kids. They have to go to school, although their school is really They have a bunch of adults that live in the habitat with them, in the settlement with them, and they're like their communal family. And they have chores. One of Belle's chores, so Belle is 11, and one of his chores is he has to empty the dust. So this is a picture of dust from Mars. The dust on Mars is dangerous too because it's super fine, right? So it's super small and it can get into your eyes and it can irritate you, but it could also be very dangerous because you could breathe it into your lungs. So in the book, there are filters in the settlement, and then when they get filled with dust, Belle has to walk around and empty the dust out. The kids also have to work to help raise food for the farm, like food for the settlement. So they work in the farm. They have a hydroponic farm where they raise vegetables, and of course they raise a lot of algae. You can have a nice, tasty spirulina smoothie. You can have that on Earth if you want to. But also, they don't just raise algae for eating purposes. They also raise it for other things because algae, you can make it into paper and you can also make it into toilet paper, which we know is very important. So I would like to add that I wrote this book a long time before COVID hit, and it's had some very eerie similarities. So one of the chores the children have to do is make toilet paper. Belle is a really curious kid, and actually all the kids are pretty curious about what life is like on Earth because they've never visited it. And Belle is especially curious about the whole concept of animals, right? Because he's only ever met a cat, and he's never seen any of these other animals. He's never seen a fish, and he can't even imagine that there are bodies of water where creatures swim because there's no oceans on Mars. Or he can't quite imagine that there would be a bird that would fly in the air because there's no birds or bats on Mars. In fact, we haven't found another living organism yet. So the book begins when something crashes on the surface of Mars just outside of the American settlement. We don't know what it is, and the kids don't know what it is, and the adults don't know what it is, but it's big and it shakes their settlement. The kids think it was probably an alien ship, and the adults think it might be a meteorite, but nobody is sure. But kids being kids, they want to find out what it is, right? So they do something a little sneaky. They take a rover, and their rovers are kind of like their cars, right? They're not supposed to. In fact, they're forbidden to take rovers, but they're just dying of curiosity to see if an alien plane crashed on Mars. And they're also curious about something else. See, the American settlement isn't the only country on Mars. There are actually 4 other countries that have settlements on Mars. There's France and Finland and Russia and China. But the children have never met anybody from those settlements, and they've never been able to visit them or see them because of something that happened a long time ago when they were little. And so now they're not allowed to have any contact with foreign countries. But this doesn't really stop the kids, because when they hear about that possible crash on Mars, they take the rover and they head out. And on their way to try to investigate the crash, they decide to take a little detour and drive by the French settlement and take a peek at what the French people look like. Unfortunately for them, their rover crashes, they get in trouble, and they don't really get a good look at anything. Then a few months later, they have a big supply ship come from Earth, one of those every 2-year supply ships, and it's full of all the things they need, like chocolate and salt and some toys and some new movies and things for the grown-ups, like supplies and tools. But also, it turns out that there is a stowaway on this ship. And this is the little stowaway, a mouse. So a couple of mice stowed away on the ship for the trip to Mars and survived. And the kids catch one of the mice and they name it Muffin because they caught him eating a muffin in the kitchen, and they keep him in like a little, a little plastic terrarium. Unfortunately, the mice have brought a disease with them. It's a respiratory disease because a lot of rodents in history carry diseases. During the Black Plague, the Black Death, rats carried it. And so this little mouse carries a plague, like not a plague, carries a respiratory virus, kind of like hantavirus. And all the grown-ups get sick. And so the poor kids are left alone to take care of all the grown-ups for a few weeks. And then after a while, they get very scared and worried, and they realize that they desperately need help. And they can't really get help from Earth, right? Because it takes months and months and months for a ship to get from Earth to Mars. And so they decide that they really need to go and contact the foreign settlements and try and get some help. And so they take the underground, there's an underground train that connects all the foreign settlements. And so Belle and Trey get on the train and they head off to try to find help. And what happens next? I don't know. You're going to probably have to read the book. So I'm going to leave you there with that cliffhanger. I'm going to stop sharing. Right. I think it stopped sharing. Oops, I need to escape. And I'm coming back. All right. And so now that you've heard a little bit about the book, I thought we could take some questions. So if anybody has questions.
Yeah, and if you have questions, just drop them in the chat and I will be keeping an eye on it. But to get things started, so this is a little bit of everything, which I love. Like I was the type of kid that would, I didn't read sci-fi, I didn't read historical fiction, I wanted pure mysteries, and I would turn my nose up at everything. So one of the things that I really loved about The Lion of Mars is that you almost trick us into reading a sci-fi novel. You do wrap up a little bit of history. Were you a big sci-fi reader as a growing up?
So I'm one of 5 children and I have 4 brothers. And my dad. So all of the boys were huge sci-fi readers. I read a little and watched the original Star Trek, which will age me. But I think what I was fascinated with was their reactions to the books. They were always obsessed with the aliens and the spaceships and the cool weapons. But I was really curious about like what were the relationships on Mars? Like what was family like when you're starting off on a new planet? And I think that's what I really wanted to explore in this book was like the concept of family.
All right. And we have a question from Aurelia. And Aurelia would like to know, when did you start writing The Lion of Mars and why? And I know you touched a little bit on the why, but I thought you can go ahead. Yeah.
So I started writing it about 4 years ago. And it came about because of 2 reasons. One, because of my dad. I've always been interested in space because of his career as a pilot, but also because of my husband. So my husband is like a massive space fan. He applied to be an astronaut. He was rejected, but he tried. And we always fight about Mars. It's kind of this running theme in our whole marriage. So about how he wants to go and live on Mars. And I've always said, I don't think I would want to do that because, there's no water. It's so far away. I'd miss grass and trees. So I think I finally decided to explore what it would be like to live on Mars to try to win the argument. So
how long did it take you to research for this book?
Yeah, so it was funny. So I thought that writing science, light science fiction about something in the future would be much easier. It was actually harder than writing historical fiction because with historical fiction, the people you talk to, historians, they have a generally agreed upon version of the past, or they can at least say, this was when the car was invented, or any basic things like that. With Mars in the future, I talked to a lot of NASA astronauts, or NASA scientists and engineers, and they were really generous with their time and super sweet, but they don't necessarily agree about like what the future is going to look like, right? It's still up in the air, but although we are in the most amazing resurgence of the space race ever, in this last year has been phenomenal for space. We've sent 2 astronauts with SpaceX to the International Space Station. We just sent 3 more like 2 weeks ago. We just sent a new rover to Mars called Perseverance. It's landing next month. So we are full steam ahead for space. It's literally the most exciting time. So one thing I really wanted it to be was very realistic as possible. So I talked to a lot of people who are actually building the habitats that they're going to live on in Mars and the practical things. And one thing I learned from talking to them is that I think when we think of people going to Mars, we think of like, scientists who are just going to study things. And the reality is the first people who go to Mars are going to have to be really good at like fixing things. Like they're going to have to know how to do electrical wiring and how to unclog a toilet and how to fix broken things, because you're not going to be able to call a handyman when you're on Mars. You're going to have to be able to take care of things.
That's a really good point. And not that I've had an experience, but I did feel like it was a very realistic story. Like I never once put the book down and went, "Oh, come on." It really did feel like, you know, everything was believable and yes, this is exactly how you would have lived.
Yeah, I mean,
When we can. Yeah.
like right now, so some of the people I talk to, so there are several teams that are trying to recreate what it will live like on Mars by living in very inhospitable places, like in lava tubes, in Antarctica, in Mars type situations, just to find out what kind of team it's going to take to live there. And when I talked to the woman who's in charge of kind of running this test site for people living together on Mars, she really said that the thing is that everybody's going to have to know how to do everything. So everybody's going to have to know a little bit of medicine, a little bit of electricity, because if somebody, it's going to be a dangerous place to live. If somebody dies, they can't be the only one who knows how to run the place.
Yeah, that's a good point. So Miss Gretchen has two questions for us.
Absolutely.
Her first one is, when do the experts think the time frame would be as to when the first people will be living on Mars?
So so the experts, it's hard to say. So I think we're headed very quickly to the moon. We will be at the moon very shortly because the moon is super close. It's easy to go to the moon and come back. And a lot of the innovators, so Elon Musk, who runs SpaceX, which is close to us, I got to visit it and I talked with a lot of SpaceX people. I mean, they're very convinced we're going to be on Mars in the next 10 years, which would be fabulous. I'm a little less sure about that, but I mean, his technology is pretty amazing. So it's possible. It's possible.
Yeah. And they are talking about actual like commercial flights to the moon soon, aren't they? Or
So the moon is actually pretty easy. And they have lava tubes on the moon too. So you could set up habitats fairly easily on the moon. It's just so much closer. So you could use, what they're talking about is using the moon to practice to live on Mars. It will be like, camping out on the moon to see what it would be like to live on Mars.
Okay. Gretchen, I'll get to your second question in a minute, but I do want to bounce to Marianne's because it kind of ties with what we were just talking about. And Marianne would like to know if the story changed as you wrote because of the research you did, and were you surprised by any twists that you didn't expect?
The story changed, of course. I think the biggest twist was that originally I was under the impression that dust storms were like tornadoes on Mars because of The Martian, which we've all seen, which is like a really great movie. And the writer is super talented and he did a lot of research. But he said he did there's some famous scenes in The Martian where like there's dust flying and they're flying away. And he did that for dramatic effect. And then I realized that there's no wind on Mars really because of the lack of atmosphere. So it just kind of slowly settles. It's not very exciting, but it's still very deadly because if your only source of power is from solar panels and you have, and the sun is blocked out from the dust, you can die. So it's just as dangerous.
And if I remember correctly, you said that the dust storms are every 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, they have like dust storms, little ones all over Mars all the time, but these big, massive ones that cover the entire planet and block out the sun are about every 5 years. And those are the deadly ones.
And how long do they last?
They last months.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, getting back to Gretchen's second question, she would like to know if you write one book at a time or multiple books at once, all at different stages.
Yes. So I do number two. So usually I'm working with my brother Matt on several books, like a baby mouse book maybe, and a Sunny book, or a Squish book. And then I'm doing a novel every 4 or 5 years. The novels take a lot longer, more research, and they're on a looser schedule. So I'll be working on a lot of other things with Matt. And then the novels will kind of happen when they happen.
Okay. And kind of continuing that, Miss Jill, who loved Lion of Mars, by the way, would like to know what you're working on next, if you can share with us.
Of course, I would love to. So I am working on a super secret new Baby Mouse book.
Ooh.
Baby Mouse is coming back. She's coming back. The
Yay!
graphic novel's
Okay,
back after
good.
about how many years? Like 5 years, I think.
Forever, it feels like.
It feels
Yeah,
like forever.
yeah, yeah. Yay! And do you have plans for other books down the pipe beyond Baby?
Yes. So we just finished. Matt literally just finished yesterday. My poor brother. He finished the new Sunny book, and it's called Sunny Takes a Splash, and it happens right after the last Sunny book. And it's kind of it's a summer adventure. It's about when Sunny has her first job as a kid. She works at the snack bar at the public pool, which was something that I did. I worked at the snack bar, which was a lot of fun.
Nice. Now, have you and Matt, I honestly couldn't even imagine spending more than a dinner with my brothers. I love them dearly, but
Mm-hmm.
when you guys were kids, did you guys do a lot of writing and drawing and back and forth with each other, or was this something?
Not at all, because
No.
Matt is the baby of the family. I'm the middle child. He's 6 years younger than me. I did not know him. So we fought with the kid between us who was 2 years younger than me.
Mhm.
But Matt was honestly, he was like the little toddler in the playpen in the kitchen. And I adored him because he was always doing cartoons and drawing comics and putting them on his door, and it was across from me.
Mhm.
But it was when, after he graduated from college, I was living in New York City and I had a studio apartment and he wanted to move there. He got an internship. And so he crashed with me. And if you can live with somebody in a 400 square foot single room apartment, you can work with them. And that's when we started talking about possibly doing something together.
Very nice.
Yeah. So
Very
I just
nice.
did it. It was such an age, different generation kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. Nice. And Miss Aurelio would like to know when you first started writing.
Hmm. So I first started writing my first book when I was about 23, and I was living in New York City. So I had a career before I became a writer. I worked as a broadcast producer for television commercials. I made some really exciting commercials for stuff that you guys love, like Huggies baby diapers and Huggies baby wipes and Tagamet, which is like for heart when you have
Yeah.
kind of tummy troubles. Hershey's chocolate kisses. So at night or when I was away, I would work on my first book.
And did you grow up when you were a kid, did you love to write?
I didn't. So
No. Okay.
I was a massive, massive reader, huge reader, but I came from a very practical family. I think because also I was a Navy brat. My dad became a doctor and my mom was a nurse, very, very practical backgrounds. And then my eldest brother went into the Navy. And so I didn't see the arts as something that you could go into and have a job in. But I was a huge reader. I read all the time.
So, how did your parents react when you got your first book published?
They were completely befuddled, but they were very proud. My dad was thrilled because May Amelia was, inspired by his family. So he loved it so much. Yeah.
Nice. Very nice. Well, it's not a question from Gretchen, but she has this wonderful comment. So I thought I would share. I love sharing my experiences of growing up with my students when we talk about the Sunny books. So many times I feel like you are writing about experiences I had, and I just have to share the connections with the students.
Let's hear it for the 1970s.
There you go. Yeah. Oh, it was, yeah. Yeah. So nice.
Oh, I love it.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I just loved Belle, and we talked a little bit about the beginning. But was it a process for you? Did you like start looking at the world completely different as you were writing Belle? Because you had to, you were writing this character that had never been to Earth.
Mm-hmm.
And so did you have to kind of vamp the way you viewed or thought about the world around you as you were writing this?
Yeah, I mean, ironically, I feel like we're living through it now. We're all a bit isolated, right? We're living in this very isolated with just our family. And what I did compare it to, I kept going back to, was a little bit of May Amelia. So my dad's family is from Finland, and when they came to America in the 1800s, they had a family farm, and they had a very hard time, obviously, was very dangerous, and they didn't speak the language, a lot of hardship, and also incredibly isolated. So I started to look at that the settlement on Mars as if it was a family farm, and how they just had to keep it going. They had to use a lot of ingenuity, and I kind of imagined, I kind of transposed like this the family farm onto Mars in a way, where like all of the children had to have chores. Like you have to just keep everything going and keep everything working.
I think that's a really interesting dichotomy that you looked back to your family's history to write a book that's set, what, 70 years in the future on a different planet. I think that's a really interesting dichotomy there.
Yeah, and I think that was a huge influence, because I think we've forgotten a lot of what that's like, in the sense that I think within a generation, we've forgotten what it, a lot of families were farming at the turn of the century. My dad, he grew up on the family farm. He could fix anything, he could make anything. Had a lot of really good skills to just figure out problems, and I feel like we've lost a little bit of that.
Yeah.
And when we go to live in a new place, we're going to have to, I think like shop class is going to be cool again for kids, to live on Mars. You're going to have to know how to melt plastic together, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's gonna be really interesting to take Lion of Mars and to pair it with a historical fiction novel
Yeah.
and talk about the similarities between what your characters have to do and what they have to know and what they have to learn and what their daily lives are like.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, because I always thought that my Finnish family, they might as well have gone to Mars, quite frankly, because
Yeah,
they never went home. It was like a
yeah,
one-way trip, and they didn't
yeah,
even have the phones to call home. So
right.
they
And
literally might have
yeah.
gone to another planet. They never saw their family or their country again.
Yeah, and they had to know how to do everything, just
Yep.
like, the people in Lion of Mars had to know how to do everything. That's a really I hadn't even thought about that aspect of your novel before. Well
Yeah.
done.
Thank
Well
you.
done. You're welcome. You're welcome. So, what are you reading these days that you're really excited about?
What am I reading these days? Oh, so I like a lot of romance, unfortunately, and it's not very appropriate for
That's
children.
unfortunate. Oh, well, I think it'd
I'm
be
trying to think. I haven't read. I'm sad to say I haven't read a lot of kids' books these days. So, but I'm always on the hunt for great graphic novels, and I'm a huge fan of Nathan Hale and his
mhm.
Hazardous Tales books, and he has a new one out, which I'm anxious to get my paws on. I love his stuff because he blends historical fiction and comics, and they're so exciting. I love the Donner Dinner Party.
Yes. That's
It's
one of my
fabulous.
favorites too. Yeah,
I
it's one
love
of
it.
my favorites too.
I
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
I literally love it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
he's
I will say
talented.
yeah, and I will say part of my loving it is I love to see the parents' reactions when I'm like, "Oh, I've got the perfect gift, the perfect recommendation for your reader. Here you go." And they're like, "Really?"
Oh my
So,
gosh, my kids tore through those books so fast,
yeah.
and they have grown up with comics creators, and they're so jaded, but they just go back to his books again and again.
Yeah.
Oh, the other book I did read, which was amazing, is Twins by Varian Johnson.
Oh, I haven't read that one yet.
It's so good. It's a graphic novel.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's about twin sisters. It's contemporary, super sweet. It's kind of a middle school read. I loved it. I loved
Yeah.
it.
I know that there are some kids authors out there that when they're writing a new book, they try not to read any kids books because they don't
That's
want to be
me.
Is that you? Okay. And is
Yeah.
it you don't want to be influenced or yeah.
I don't want to be influenced, and I just want to be able to turn my brain off a little bit. So, which is why I read romance. It's like sorbet. It cleanses my palate. When I
Yeah.
just
It's brain candy, right? Yeah.
I literally just turn my brain off a little bit and dream
Yeah.
of vampires or something.
Yeah. Now, I know this next question, and guys, I'm hogging. So if you guys have any other questions, please continue to add them to the chat. But I know this next question is going to be like asking if, which one of your kids is your favorite. But of your characters in Lion of Mars, is there one that just kind of you hold a little bit closer to your heart that's a little bit more cherished than the others?
So I love Vera. So
Yeah.
Vera is this kind of snarky girl who's very suspicious, and she's always got a witty comeback. She's a little, she's a little dark. a little edgy, but she's got a soft side. So she's the snarky character, and I like her a lot. I love Vera.
Yeah. I think
Go ahead. I'm so sorry.
Oh, no, I was just gonna say that one of the things one of the many things I loved about this book is the diversity of the characters, so that and they're all prominent characters in the story, right? So that any reader is going to see themselves in this book. And again, going back to, tricking readers like me into reading sci-fi because they're going to fall in love with these characters because they're going to
Aw.
see themselves in it. So I thought that was really well done.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry, you were gonna say.
No, you're good. I was
Okay.
gonna say, so Belle is he was kind of a fun character to write because he's really he's literally a combination of my two kids. So my son, who's 17, Will, is the craziest cat lover in the world, like his entire life. And in fact, we have two cats now, and they spend their entire day with him in his room. I mean, the little cat, we have a little cat now. She cries outside his door hysterically in the morning after she's fed if she can't get back in, just pitiful crying. Because he spends so much time with them, like he is like the cat person. And then my daughter Millie she's always been super, super curious, always asking questions about science, loves science. And so Belle is really like a combo of the two of them.
Are your kids test readers for you, for your books?
Not as much test readers anymore as my secretary. So, so we have a funny relation. Well, not this year, but they got very used to. I don't get ideas when I'm just sitting home at my computer at my desk. Like I'm not a writer who sits down at 9 and works till 5. I usually work every 7 days a week. But I often get my ideas when I'm like driving them to school or picking them up. And so they've gotten very good at, I'll say, all right, text me this, write me this, like cats, Mars, dust. Like I'll just tell them words, which are like my notes, my crib notes, and they do it. So I've got them trained up well to be my secretaries. So they're my little note takers.
That's good. Yeah, very nice. Well, does anybody else have any questions? I feel like I've been hogging the conversation and I apologize, everybody. So any other questions? Otherwise, I think.
Okay. Oh, one.
Oh,
I
yeah.
have new. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah.
Miss Gretchen.
Nothing like pressure. We're all watching, Gretchen.
I know.
We're all watching the chat.
And typed out.
Yeah. That's funny.
My favorite books when I was a kid. So my favorite author was an author named Lloyd Alexander. He was kind of like the J.K. Rowling of the 70s. He wrote a series of fantasy books, one of which was made into a terrible Disney movie called The Black Cauldron, which is my favorite book of all time. And I have a great Lloyd Alexander story. So I was completely obsessed with him. And I wrote him a fan letter when I was in elementary school. And I sent it to the publisher in New York, which I don't know, I think it might have been Harper. And months later, I come home from school and my mom says, "There's somebody on the telephone for you, a man," and kind of disapproving. And I pick up the phone and this voice says, "Hello, this is Lloyd Alexander. I was calling for Jennifer Holm." And I was completely starstruck. And I thought he was calling to talk to me about my amazing letter. It turned out that he did not live far away from me. He lived about half hour, 40 minutes away. And he recognized the phone number I put. So when I wrote him the letter, I never included my home address. I just included my phone number. So he was just calling me to get my address because he recognized me as like a sort of local kid. And I was so embarrassed. It was just like, "I love your books. I love your books." And then hung up. And so for years after that, I was completely like humiliated because I thought I had my favorite author on the telephone. He called me at my house and all I could say was, "I love your books." Like I was so lame. Like I had so many questions. And then many years later, I was at a bookstore in Philly. And the bookseller, who has since retired, Hannah, I was lamenting. I told this story to many booksellers over the years, and I've told her this story. And she just laughed. And then we went into her office to take care of some stuff. And she picked up the phone and she made a phone call and she said, "Oh, yeah. Oh, hey, Lloyd. Yeah, I have somebody who wants to talk to you." And she put me on the phone with Lloyd Alexander. And I said, "Oh, I love your books." No, but I did say some other things. And he wrote me this lovely letter, which I have framed, which said that he remembered the young girl that he called in Audubon, Pennsylvania, a very small, forgettable town. And he was happy that I turned out okay. So that is my claim to fame, Lloyd Alexander story.
It's a good one. It's
Yeah.
a great one.
It
Yeah.
was great. Yeah.
Yeah.
I never met him in person, but I got to talk to him on the phone twice. So.
Okay. All right. Didn't get any books signed.
No, my husband did track down some signed copies for me. He found somewhere from some collector, but no, not in person though.
Oh.
And he's since passed away. He was quite elderly when I even talked to him the second time. So
yeah. Oh, how funny. It's amazing how the world of books just connects so many of us, right?
I know. It was such a crazy story.
Yeah. Well, any other questions, comments? Again, y'all, if you haven't had a chance to read The Lion of Mars, it is probably, it was just a great read. And it's easily going to be one of my top picks this year. It's going to be hard to beat. And I'm not saying that because Jennifer's just sitting right here in front of me.
She's
but
just saying that.
Yeah. No, I'm not. It was, and again, I don't read sci-fi, even as an adult, even as I know I should. But the fact that it just captured me and engaged me and I couldn't stop reading it, it's going to be so much fun to give that book to kids. So thank you. So you guys, you're going to have a wonderful time turning readers onto this book.
Well, thank you so much for hosting me, you guys. Anderson's is an amazing indie bookstore south of Chicago in Naperville. And what's the other? Downers
Grove. So
but they ship everywhere. So let's support our indies, and then you can read it and tell me what you think. I have a Facebook page where I interact with my fans, so you can send me emails about what you loved and hated about it, or what you would have named your cat on Mars. And
perfect.
We'll find out what you think.
Perfect. Well, thank you all so much for being here tonight. And Miss Jennifer, thank you so much for being here tonight. And again, not just for The Lion of Mars, but for giving us stories that just stay with us as we grow up. And that, again, there's, I think, no better testament to the talent of an author, the fact that we as adults love to read these books. We love to share these books, but we love to connect with the readers in our lives over these books. So thank you so much for everything that you do. We so love you for it, and we love your stories.
Thank you. Well, you guys have an awesome weekend, okay?
Yeah.
It's a 3-day weekend, so sleep in late tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, for some of us.
I know, exactly. The kids can sleep in.
Right. Yeah.
Let your parents sleep in, you guys.
That's right. Exactly. Be kind to them this weekend.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.